Welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, the Indiana Hoosiers go on the road and take care of business against Rutgers 84-54. It was exactly the kind of win that Indiana needed. And I will just start off the show by saying, don't poo-poo it, don't underplay it and say it's just Rutgers. Yes, Rutgers is not a very good team, and they've lost 10 games in a row. But Indiana went out and dominated tonight, and it's exactly what Indiana should have done. It's what they did, and so I think this is a game to be happy about, be excited about, and I think that portends good things for the future for this team, which we're going to talk about on tonight's episode. I am your host, Jerod Morris. I will be joined tonight by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, my usual co-hosts, and we will break down this game as well as look ahead to the Northwestern game that is coming up on Wednesday. Let's start out the show like we always do with the banner moment, the Bottoms line, and Ryan's rant. And for me, I really thought that coming into this game, someone asked me on a radio spot that I did, how important would it be how Indiana started the game? Coming off that tough loss to Purdue, obviously Indiana needed to come out with the right mentality on the road. And I said I didn't think it mattered as much how they started the game as how they started the second half, because that's where so many games have been won or lost for Indiana. Well, I thought Indiana, at the start of the game, it was a little up and down, lots of turnovers, a lot of activity, but the Hoosiers just seemed almost a little too keyed up. And so it was 14-14, actually, at the under 12-minute timeout. Well, Indiana went on a nice little run there in the first half, took a 10-point lead at halftime, but what I think we all were most impressed by was how Indiana came out in the second half. And they just exploded to a 9-0 run to start things off. They only missed one shot, and it was still a good look, I think, in their first 6 possessions. Ultimately, it was a 12-4 run, and then they backed that up with another 12-6 run during the second, the stretch between the first and second TV timeouts. So all told, the Hoosiers come out going a 24-10 run to start the second half, and they cruised from there. And that, to me, was the most impressive part about this game for Indiana, is it wasn't a blowout from the start. They really had to kind of work their way into the game, but once they did, I thought they played really well, especially on the defensive end, and I have an excellent defensive stat that you're going to want to hang around for that I'll get to after we finish going around the horn here to start things off. But with all that said, Andy, let's go over to you and get your Bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
A lot of guys to pick from, I thought, that played well, but I'll go with Yogi. I've got a hunch that Ryan probably wants to talk about Perea, so we'll see if that plays out or not. And even if not, no pressure to talk about him, Ryan. But I thought Yogi was kind of like a tale of two halves for him. First half really seemed to be focused on facilitating, passed up a couple open looks to get it to other guys, and really got things off to a pretty good start. And then in the second half, he really attacked. There was some pretty open driving lanes to the basket, and he made a few nice shots around the rim. So another really strong all-around game from him in the end. 17 points, was just 2 of 7 from 3. I actually forgot he had made the one in the first half where I was a little worried that the streak might be in jeopardy, but he shot a few more at the end and made one. So he ended up with 17 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and only 1 turnover on a night when, at least early on, the team really struggled from a turnover perspective. So I thought just another good all-around game from him. Kind of gave everybody a dose of all the great things about his game, and continued his really strong run of play recently.
Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, I think I do want to talk about Perea. I was thinking maybe James Blackman, because he bounced back again. Showed that he's capable of taking over stretches of a game. But I also thought that Blackman maybe overdid it a little early on and sort of settled in the second half. But I think Perea's play all around was the key for me tonight. He only hit 3 shots from the field, but he was 7 of 8 at the free throw line, had 5 rebounds and a block. But he altered so many shots, and he was just really active and involved. And he continues to look like he's a different player since that knee injury. And I've said this to people on Twitter who are asking, maybe it's because he thought he was going to lose his starting spot. I don't think it's that. I think it's the fact that sometimes when you sit down and watch a game and you know where people are supposed to be and what they're supposed to do, and you know the offense and you see them not doing it, or maybe getting there late, or watch defensive rotations or something, you gain a different perspective. And I think that's what's happened with Perea, is he's sort of had a chance to step back and see basketball be played and watch it, as a viewer, and really soak it in and absorb it and become better. And it showed tonight. I thought that, yeah, sure, it's against Rutgers, a weak team, but he really looked active, involved, and was going after the ball hard in every situation. Even if he couldn't grab a rebound, he was right there going for it and just really active, and I thought that was a real impressive game from him.
I agree. And I think, what we all wanted from Hunter when he came back was for him to help impact the defense. And so I don't think it is any coincidence that Hunter is now back. He played 22 minutes tonight, was active, played well, and Indiana had by far their best defensive effort of the season. Now, all the caveats apply that Rutgers is not a very good offensive team. I get that. They're by far the worst offensive team in the Big Ten. In fact, let me get the numbers right. They came into tonight's game with an adjusted offensive efficiency of 95.1. And as we've noticed the trend, and I talked about this on the halftime show tonight, we've noticed this trend where Indiana plays really good defense in the first half, and then the defense pretty much collapses in the second half. And so after holding a team to under their point per possession average in the first half, we give up way more than the average in the second half. Well, tonight that didn't happen. Indiana's defense actually improved in the second half, and Rutgers for the game only scored 0.8 points per possession, which is, again, by far, I can't think back to all the non-conference games, but I certainly can't remember a game since the middle of December where that was even possible. So, and again, so a lot of that has to do with Rutgers not being very good offensively, but I thought Indiana did some things on defense tonight that contributed to that as well. Number one, they cleaned up the defensive glass, getting almost 80% of the rebounds, and I think that was a big point of emphasis after the Purdue game. So it's great to see the Hoosiers come out and out-rebound Rutgers overall 45-32. But, I think having Hunter back there helps to alter shots and just make things a little bit more difficult for Rutgers. And, and again, I just thought the other thing that I heard was a lot more chatter, a lot more talking from Indiana. And so something that we've heard a lot this year, Tom Crean talking about that we're not talking enough out there, that seemed to be more on display today. So, Andy, I want to get your thoughts, and Ryan, you too, on if you saw anything different from Indiana on defense. Was this more a function of Rutgers? Was this more a function of something that we did? Or just kind of a glorious combination of a really bad offensive team and us playing well, and we can enjoy some good numbers for once? Andy, you first.
I actually would probably attribute it mostly to Rutgers. I thought, especially early on, IU really struggled containing the dribble, and gave up some really easy baskets by the rim. I don't think we saw as much of that in the second half. I also thought Rutgers played like a team that had lost 10 games in a row, and guys just started going out and jacking up quick shots. Didn't really try as hard to get to the rim. And I thought IU's zone was relatively effective as well. I mean, Rutgers only shot 12 threes, but at least forced them to, take some other contested shots. So, I mean, I would give a little bit of credit to IU, but I think it's hard to overstate how bad Rutgers actually is. One area that IU really excelled, though, is free throw defense. I mean, Rutgers only hit 40% of their free throws, so clearly something that IU's been working on in practice. And it's also apparently impairing our own ability to hit free throws, so they only hit 60% tonight. But, I mean, I think there were some improvements, but it's so hard to actually figure out how much of that is defensive improvement versus how bad Rutgers really is. So I say just enjoy it, and let's just leave it at that.
I think maybe the opponent had something to do with it, but I just thought the team seemed more confident defensively. Whether that's attributed completely to the fact that they knew Rutgers was terrible is definitely up for debate. I mean, I'm not going to say that the team is all of a sudden better defensively, but I think that there was more confidence, and that may be a symptom of the opponent, maybe a symptom of having Perea back there to help defend on drives. I don't know, but they did seem to me to be more confident. I also thought on the ball, I thought Robert Johnson looked a lot better tonight than he's looked good in stretches defensively this year, but I thought for pretty much the entire game, I thought he was pretty locked in defensively. James Blackman still has a lot to work on defensively, and that showed up a few times tonight. So that hasn't improved, but I thought that the other freshman guard looked pretty good for most of tonight defensively.
Let's talk real quick about Troy Williams, who started off the game really shaky, had a couple of just really bad turnovers, one where the ball got poked away on a breakaway, another where he tried to throw kind of a ridiculous behind-the-back pass that didn't even come close to connecting. And it seemed like one of those games where Troy was just really keyed up. I know his mom was at the game, and I'm sure, we know Troy always wants to make big plays. And he also had an attempt where he actually had the ball in pretty good position. He tried to dunk it instead of just shooting it, and he was so far away from the rim, he didn't even come close to getting it on the rim. And again, it's the type of game that a month and a half ago, I feel like he struggles early. He doesn't quite get into the game, and it really hurts us. But I thought he did a nice job of being productive anyway. He only played 23 minutes, so he didn't play as much as usual. Had the early foul trouble, and then, of course, we got up big late, so his minutes were down. But he still found a way with 7 points and 9 boards to be active and be productive. And I know someone just tweeted that it's the first time in a while that Indiana's won when Troy Williams hasn't been in double figures. But I think, again, someone asked tonight, do you think Troy Williams is the X factor? And I said, well, I think Troy has kind of moved himself out of X factor status because he's playing so consistently. He had 14 points, or at least 14 points and 7 boards in 6-7 straight games, something like that. And I think tonight showed that again. I mean, the points weren't there, but the activity, and I just think his ability to impact the game and help Indiana set the tone was there. I said James Blackman Jr. is more of an X-factor guy because you don't quite know what you're going to get from him. And tonight, he stepped up offensively. But curious what you guys thought of Troy Williams because, as we kind of watch his evolution as a player, you just think back to that Michigan State game where he really struggles early and just never gets in the game, and some other road games. We're really seeing him now, every single night come out and find ways to be productive, even if he's not scoring as much. Andy, thoughts on Troy?
Yeah, I mean, I thought kind of what you said. I thought the first part was really out of control, but he took him out, put Hartman in for him a little bit early on, and then it seemed like he settled down pretty well from there. And he didn't really force shots. I mean, he only took 5 shots. That's one of his lower totals of the season. Didn't feel like he felt the need to force those. Got a few good baskets going toward the rim, and also felt like he tried to pass a little bit more to other guys when he got close to the rim. I think he laid one off and tried to throw into Holt at one point. He mishandled it. So I thought there were a couple times that he tried to look for other guys. The one thing that has stuck out to me about him lately, and I just looked this up, was the rebounding. It seemed like he's really become a more consistent rebounder, and he's doing a better job with both positioning. And then once he gets positioned, I mean, his athleticism is going to allow him to outjump pretty much anybody for rebounds. So this is the 7th straight game where he's had at least 7 rebounds, and he's had 4 of those 7 with 9 or more. So I think that's definitely a positive sign. I think that's been some of the question about Perea and his rebounding, things like that. But I think Troy has really added that to his game and done a pretty good job consistently there. So I thought it was overall a solid but not spectacular performance from Troy on a night that IU didn't need a ton from him. But I did like at least the way he settled down a bit after that after the very rough start.
Yeah, and the two things that we've really wanted from him in terms of showing growth is an improved shot and just improved consistency. And the one we've certainly seen, the improved consistency. Now we're just waiting on the improved shot. But Ryan, any additional thoughts on Troy?
I thought the rebounding was key. He seemed to be going up for big boards every time. He was way above the rim, just grabbing boards. I mean, he had 9 rebounds and they were all defensive. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, you shut down second chance opportunities by, as Andy said, getting in good position and being able to go up and grab boards, and you also cause them to commit fouls sometimes when you're in good position and they're going to go after the ball. You're going to get them hacking on you and making mistakes in that way. So the point totals weren't there, but he didn't need to be, and I thought that in the second half especially he sort of felt the flow of the game and just kind of stuck with what he was doing and helping move the ball, set screens, get rebounds, look for other people, and it was a really nice recovery from the first 5 minutes or so, which were really ugly. That behind-the-back pass that he tried to throw to Robert Johnson, had he just jump-stopped and kicked it out, it would have been so much nicer than even in a behind-the-back pass because there was no one within 10 feet of Robert. So, it's just about Troy realizing, getting a good head on his shoulders for the flow of the game, for time and score, things like that, and making the right play instead of the spectacular play.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch the SportsCenter top 10 jump stops tonight, Ryan. That's going to be great. I'm just messing with you. Okay, so let's talk about the bench real quick, because very rare has been the game that Indiana has won and looked good winning when they have not had significant production from the bench, from at least one guy on the bench. And certainly we got that tonight with Nick Zeisloft, who stepped in, knocked down some shots. He was 3 or 4 from downtown. Even had a steal and a coast-to-coast layup, which was really nice to see. And some other guys played well, too, off the bench. I thought Emmett Holt had some nice minutes. Despite maybe not converting a couple shots, you'd like to see him convert down there. And I thought Stan Robinson played some good minutes, too. He continues to not force things on offense and is doing much more over these last 4 or 5 games what we've wanted to see from him, which is drive to set up his teammates. And he had 3 assists, but I can think of at least 2 other times off the top of my head where he set up a teammate for a wide-open three-pointer that simply wasn't converted. And so he could have had more assists. Now, on the downside with the bench was Colin Hartman, who did not score, missed a couple of open looks, and didn't come back in the game after he seemed to bang his knee. And I don't have an update on him. If either one of you guys have seen one on Twitter, feel free to chime in. But let's just talk real quick about the bench. And Ryan, we'll go to you first. What stood out to you? Because, again, we just look for positives to take forward from this game. I think getting those bench guys in and having some positive minutes and getting some positive contributions tonight is important as we head down the stretch.
Yeah, Zeisloft has struggled sort of over the last 2 months with consistently hitting his threes. He'll have a good game and then sort of not get many good looks or not be able to knock anything down. So it was important. And you could see Yogi was feeding him from time to time, just sort of giving up open looks and say, hey, let's get you on track almost. And I thought he played a great game regardless of the scoring. I thought look, he's not a great defender, but the effort is there defensively. And in a couple of these games where we didn't have Perea, he was stuck down in the post guarding guys, and he was working his butt off. He may not have been able to do anything, but he was working hard. And I think that not only should fans respect that, but I think his teammates respect that too, and they want to get him going on the offensive end. And tonight he was very good offensively, I thought. He picked his spots, followed through on his shot, looked like he was squared up. It's clearly something he's been working on. And then Stan, you're right. I think this is about the 5th game in a row where Stan has looked pretty good on offense and defense, just sort of picking his spots and being more comfortable with his role as a guy who's not going to step out and hit jump shots. He's going to facilitate other people. He's going to drive into the lane and kick it out and be involved. And as we know, he's a very good defender as well. And so when you get him on the floor, you're going to get some help there as well.
Andy, if you don't mind, let me lead you into your talk about the bench with just talking about Colin Hartman. And if he's hurt, we have no idea if he's hurt or going to be out for any period of time, but he's a guy who continues to lead this team in O rating, obviously without using a lot of possessions, but that number has continued to dwindle as he struggled these last few games. How much is that going to hurt Indiana if they can't get him back into the Colin Hartman form that we saw in the middle of the Big Ten season?
Yeah, I think I have not, I guess first on the injury, I haven't seen any updates. In watching the replay, I initially thought that first they hit knee on knee. It looked like it actually caught him more from the side when I went to when they showed the replay where he had kind of turned himself a little bit and kind of took the other guy's knee like right to the side of his knee, not the same knee that he hurt last year. I guess thankfully, I don't know. So we'll kind of see there. I guess as far as what that means to him, I do think he's a guy who means more than scoring, and hopefully as Perea continues to improve and play a little bit better as he has these last couple of games, the scoring piece diminishes itself even a little bit more. But I do think versatility from a defensive standpoint, he, like we talked about after the Purdue game, he did a pretty good job against Hammonds and is one of the better guys from a communication and awareness standpoint defensively. So I do think that's an issue, and not only that, it's just who do those other minutes go to? It's not as if you've seen anything really from Hotzel that makes you feel confident in him needing to see additional minutes. And while Holt and Perea did play together again a bit tonight, that's been pretty rare, all things told. So I do think it would be a big loss if if he's injured, and B, I do think he does still bring that threat of stretching the defense, making three-pointers there. So hopefully something he can get back in the groove on. And it's probably a bit of an adjustment for him as well. I mean, when you kind of look at, he was playing in that 15, 18-minute range for so long. Then he got up into the 20s and 30s pretty consistently, and now he's back more into that 15 to 18-minute range. I think in the same way there was a little bit of an adjustment period to him playing more where he struggled a little bit, didn't score a ton when they beat Ohio State. He played 24 minutes in that game. 23 against Penn State after that. He really kind of got himself into a groove when he started playing consistently upwards of 25 minutes. Now I think there's that similar adjustment period going back. So I think ultimately, as long as his knee's okay, he's going to be okay. That from an effort standpoint and just awareness, he does enough things, makes a lot of smart plays that he's still going to be able to contribute.
We got a few questions coming in, asking us to look ahead, and we will do that. In response to some other questions, no, we can't get you a date with Yogi's mom. Sorry. That's just not what we do here on the assembly call.
Get in line, pal.
Was that Bardo? Was that Bardo sending that question in after his lengthy discussion about that a few games ago? That's pretty sure.
If you want a date,
that's from Stephen Bardo.
If you want a date with Yogi's mom, you got to get in line. Bardo is up there. He's been on that train for a while.
Oh boy. Okay, Ryan. There's something I wanted to ask you before we start looking ahead. And that is, I thought our freshman guards showed a particular sign of maturity tonight, and I want to know if you saw the same thing. And that is, we have seen all season long, James Blackman Jr. especially, when he goes to the basket, not being very tough and letting a little bit of contact throw him off and either not be able to get the ball up at the rim, turn it over. And I thought in the first half especially, he was really good at scoring at the rim and being strong, taking some contact. And I thought Robert Johnson did the same thing too. He did have a couple turnovers, and those guys did have a few turnovers. But I thought there were a couple times in the second half actually where, Robert drove, took some contact, and either set up a teammate or scored himself. And to me, those are kind of some little subtle things you look for in young guys that show they're starting to adjust to the college game, to Big Ten play, and that show you that they're pushing through a wall or going over it as opposed to getting stopped by it. Did you see that same thing from them, and is that as good a sign as I'm making it out to be?
Yeah, I think that they're starting to learn, and you've seen sort of nuggets of that showing up throughout the season, just not consistently. And what you're getting is they're learning how to play in the Big Ten. If you go to the basket in the Big Ten, you're going to get contact. Whether or not it's a foul or called a foul or anything is, that's up to the officials, and they and I differ on certain things. But I think anybody who watches the program knows that. But I think they're starting to learn that, look, you got to play through contact. It's something the team did not do well last year. It's something that it took Cody Zeller 2 seasons to learn how to do. It took Victor Oladipo 2 seasons to learn how to do. And he finally got it throughout his entire junior year. But these guys have got to learn that quickly. They're somebody who is they're 2 guys who are relied upon, and they need to be able to finish through contact, or else they're just standing shooters. And they have to be more than that for this team. So it is encouraging to see that. It's encouraging to see them go to the hoop with that level of confidence. Now they've got to do it against a better team, and they've got to do it when maybe they're not up 25. So you're right. It is something that is a key for them to develop, but it's they still have to prove themselves and still have to keep doing it.
Well, and what I liked about James especially is, number one, this is a game on the road where he struggled, and number two, he did a lot of his scoring early when the game was still in contention. And so I think, again, you're just looking for these small, subtle signs of growth, and I think we saw it. I think we should move forward and start looking ahead. Do you guys have any final thoughts on this game in particular? I mean, it was certainly a fun one, but I don't want to. And I do want to say this before we move on, that again, just in the interest of not just saying, kind of taking a 30-point win on the road for granted. It's still a 30-point win on the road, and it's a game you look at KenPom, we're predicted to win 74-68. So it's not one that was just, and again, I know they've lost 10 and all that. I just want to make the point before we move on that this is an important win for Indiana to come back from what they came back from and to dominate like they did. But do you guys have any final thoughts on this game before we move on?
I feel so bad for Eddie Jordan. That team is terrible. That's my only comment about Rutgers.
I mean, for me, I would just echo what you said about the importance of it, and really, as much from a seeding perspective as anything, one of the big knocks on IU at this point is performance away from home. They're 3-7 in road and neutral games coming into tonight, and for a team that has a number of good wins that will stand up pretty well, that kind of performance is really one that could hurt them from a seeding perspective if they were to drop won both of these games. So I think it's at least a good first step before that, and it was one where, before the game, I kind of mentioned to my wife, I was like, they really just need to throttle this team. They're just terrible. And so for the first few minutes where they were giving the ball away, it made me wonder a little bit. But it was, really the kind of performance that you'd like to see from this team, not let the other team hang around. Really took control early in the second half and went from there. And then obviously Jeremiah April, the other big story, is why the hell is this guy not getting more minutes? I mean, there was no turnaround jumper.
Not talking about April. God.
There was no turnaround jumper, which I know hurt your feelings, but he did make 2 other shots. I mean, I don't think that can go unnoticed. So,
let me get us off Jeremiah April and just say that, all joking aside, this was a must-win for Indiana. So, I mean, they went on the road, a long trip, and took care of business. Now they come back and they face what I think is another must-win. They got to beat Northwestern. They win those 2 games and then one of the last 2, and they're in fantastic shape. You'd like to win all of the final 3 games, but if you win 2 of the final 3, you're in great shape, and can't really ask for more than that. But hopefully they can take all 3 of them. Michigan State's certainly a vulnerable team.
Yeah, and just to close up our detailed discussion of Jeremiah April, and actually it's funny, of all the questions that are coming on Twitter, the most of them are actually about Jeremiah April. And I think there's a reason why we're not going to belabor this too much. There's a reason the guy hasn't played much except for garbage time. And I know it's tantalizing, the turnaround jumpers, the tip-ins, all of that. But until he actually plays in a meaningful minute, I think we have to assume that he's still relegated to that role and is not going to be playing any meaningful minutes for this team. So we won't spend any more meaningful minutes of the post-game show discussing it. Okay, so as we look ahead, interesting point there, Ryan, about Northwestern still being a must-win, because I certainly thought this game was a must-win, both for what Andy alluded to with needing a road win and just for to avoid a real negative trajectory starting. So, Andy, as we look to that Northwestern game, is it a must-win? For Indiana's tournament resume, or is that one because we have the Rutgers game now? There's not as much pressure on it, and how good is Northwestern? Maybe just expecting.
Yeah, I think it's probably not a absolute must-win from a tournament perspective. I think there's enough other really bad bubble teams that IU could probably lose all 3 of these last games, God forbid, and still get in. But it's another one where it would get you to 5-7 away from home. I think that becomes pretty important. There's something to be said for just taking care of business on the road. And I think Crimson Core just tweeted out that Illinois had only lost 1 home game all year. That was to IU, and that was really the only road win IU has over teams outside of the bottom few teams of the Big Ten. But it's another case to avoid a bad loss. Quite honestly, sometimes in tournament, seeding process, that's as important as anything. Just ask Texas, who has not beaten anyone but hasn't actually lost anyone either, and is still widely viewed as being in. So I think that becomes important as well, and I think it's hopefully one where IU can continue to build, confidence-wise. Looking this over, IU's alternated wins and losses, it looks like, for the last 8 games. So that would put this game in line for a loss. So let's hope that trend is one that we can put a stop to going to Northwestern. In terms of Northwestern, they had lost. They lost 10. They won their first Big Ten game against Rutgers, shocking, and then they lost 10 straight. And there were some blowouts mixed in there, but there were also some really close losses. They came back, took Michigan State to overtime at the Breslin Center, lost by 5 to Illinois, lost by 2 to Michigan, 2 to Ohio State, 1 to Maryland. A couple double-digit ones in there, and then they've since, they beat Iowa at home, won at Minnesota, and then just beat Penn State by 21 yesterday. So they're a team that is playing a bit better. Finally, got one of those close games to go in their favor as they did against Iowa. They really let Iowa back in and let it get to overtime. It did really well once it got there. So they're not. I think they're maybe opposite of Rutgers, and even though Rutgers only has 2 conference wins, I think they're probably worse than their record would indicate. Northwestern is 4-10. They're maybe a little bit better than that would show. But as you look at the game and a lot of the numbers, IU's only a 1-point favorite on KenPom. That doesn't include today's performance, so maybe that ticks up by a point or 2. Big Ten play, though, Northwestern's defense is next to last, so I think Rutgers is last. Or no, IU's last. How could I forget? So they're the next best thing to IU's defense. So that should mean a good chance for IU to score a lot of points. And offensively, they're really middle of the pack. They're 8th there. They shoot a lot of threes. Almost 40% of their shots come from three-point range, and they hit a relatively good percentage from there. So probably different than what IU has faced these last couple games where Purdue's not really a great 3-point shooting team, and neither is Rutgers. That'll be something they'll need to pay particular attention to in the game. But I do feel like it's one that they should win, despite the fact that Northwestern's playing a bit better. But probably won't be as easy maybe as we thought it was even a couple weeks ago, or certainly to begin the season.
Yeah, I don't think it's really. I said it was a must-win, and I think that's just from a perception standpoint. I don't think that if Indiana loses that game, there's no chance they get into the tournament or something like that. But I think that it's one of those things where if you want a good seed in the Big Ten tournament, you want one of those top 4 seeds. That's what you're fighting for right now. I think you've got to win that one if you want a chance at that. So. Yeah, if they lose, it's not the end of the world, but it's one that I think we should have, and I think we should kind of demand that we get.
Yeah, and one thing about Northwestern, there was a time when going to Northwestern was just one of those guaranteed victories, and you expected Indiana to win by 20 or 30 points. And it's been a place that's been a lot tougher for Indiana. When you look at the last 3 times we've gone there, in 2011, which is when Watford, or that was I think when Watford and Hulls were sophomores and Oladipo was a freshman. We lost at Northwestern 93-81. In 2012, we did not play at Northwestern. And then in 2013, went to Northwestern. We won, but it was 67-59, a closer game than we would have liked. And last year we went to Northwestern. It was 61-56, a closer game than we would have liked. So this is a place where it's been tough for us to play. So I know that we won by 30. We're all basking in the glow of that tonight. But, you look at the KenPom rankings, Rutgers is 208th, Northwestern is 111. So they're a much different class of team, as Andy explained. So I would certainly anticipate a tough, hard-fought game up there on Wednesday. And so it's a very important game for Indiana to win, just because, if they don't bring their A game like they did tonight, they could very easily get beaten. Let's talk real quick about the Big Ten standings. I don't have them open, so I don't know if either one of you guys have them open or have a good understanding of them and where they're at right now. But we do have a question about this, actually. Let me pull it up. This is from our buddy Justin Hodges, who asked, with the remaining schedule, what do you think our Big Ten tournament chances are to get a high seed? Ryan, if you want to take that real quick.
Well, if we win out these last couple games, I think we're getting a top 4 seed. A couple of the other teams still have to play each other ahead of us. I mean, we're 9-6 right now. Michigan State's 9-4. They're playing Illinois tonight. Purdue is 10-4. Maryland's 10-4. Obviously, Wisconsin's 13-1. They've got number 1 locked up. So it's Maryland, Purdue, Michigan State, Indiana, and then Ohio State lost to Michigan today somehow. So they're 8-6. It's kind of a bunched up group there. We're a game and a half behind Maryland and Purdue, and a game behind Michigan State. So I mean, it's tight. And with this, we have the easiest remaining schedule of any Big Ten teams, as far as I can tell, and only have 1 road game. So I think that Indiana has a great shot to finish on a high note.
Yeah, just kind of looking over it quickly. So Maryland they play Wisconsin and Michigan at home. Then they go to Rutgers and to Nebraska. So I feel relatively comfortable in saying they're probably not going to drop 2 of those games. So I think Maryland's and Wisconsin, you got to figure those 2 are locked into 2 of those top 4 seeds. But yeah, Ryan's right. Once you get past that, I mean, Purdue has struggled a bit away from home this season, earlier this week, notwithstanding. They've got Rutgers on Thursday, so that's going to be a win. But then they go to Ohio State and to Michigan State, which both should be pretty tough for them to come away with. And then Illinois at home, and Illinois beat them earlier in the season. So I don't think it's inconceivable that they drop a couple of those games. Michigan State tonight goes to Illinois. I think that could be a tough game. They still go to Wisconsin. And then they go to IU. So I think it's possible, particularly if Illinois would knock off Michigan State tonight, that final game of the season could mean quite a bit for both IU and Michigan State. So I think it's right on the borderline. I think the thing that probably scared me the most today was somebody had posted a set of stats that were what the seedings would look like if it was today. And if IU won their first game, then they'd be in line to play Purdue again in the quarterfinals. So as we talked about at length the other night, that would not be the ideal matchup. So almost at that point, you'd love to get that double bye, but you also want to try to avoid that kind of matchup. Not that getting in the other part of the bracket that would lead to them potentially facing Wisconsin would be all that desirable either. So maybe our best case is to get in that middle middle section there and avoid maybe both of those. But I think still a lot of tough games for the teams right around IU to be played. So I think there's a chance they work their way into that. And I think to Ryan's point, if IU is able to win out, they've probably got a pretty good shot at that because they'll have given Michigan State at least one loss in the process. And like I said, I have to think Purdue could lose, a game or two in that mix. So could be there. Probably there's three other teams with 6 losses at this point too. So there's going to be a lot of wiggle room there as we go down the stretch. So probably an easier question to answer as we get into this time next week. But for now, I think it's still in play, and given the schedules of IU and the teams in front of them, I think there's definitely a shot at that.
What kind of an attitude is that? Are we afraid to play Purdue now? Are we going to cower before the great A.J. Hammonds and just be terrified of being matched up with them again?
Well, apparently I'm just an IU fanboy, and you guys had reasoned dialogue about this, so I should really recuse myself from the discussion.
We did have a great moment where someone, a Purdue fan, was watching the IU Purdue postgame show and tweeted us and said that Andy and I had very reasoned analysis and thought that Ryan was just, kind of off his rocker. But I wonder who's supposed to take that as a compliment.
Obviously, I'm not sure. Obviously, that shows that even if this was a guy's first time listening, I mean, he's up to speed pretty quickly on where things stand. So I think we're good.
Yes,
okay.
I'm the diehard fanboy. Jerod is as straight line. How many times have you picked IU this year in our pick'em contest? Every one? You picked?
Yeah, which is I think why I'm losing pick'em contest. But okay, so I want to take a step back real quick after this game and just kind of take the temperature, get your guys' thoughts on where we are overall. When you look at, obviously when we went up to Wisconsin, we knew that was going to be a really tough game to win. And it was, and Indiana, ended up getting their doors blown off. But since then, the Hoosiers went home and defeated Michigan in a tough, hard-fought game. They went on the road and played a really good game against Maryland, despite losing. Played 40 great minutes against Minnesota. Let Purdue take them out of what they wanted to do on offense and didn't play very well at home, and then played really well against Rutgers. So when you look at the last 5 games, and I mentioned this because we talked a lot at the start of the year about how Indiana teams under Tom Crean haven't always finished the season well, have kind of faded a little bit, and I know the Purdue game gets magnified because it was Purdue. But if you look at those 40 minutes inside, within the context of the last, 160 minutes or 200 minutes that this team has played, I feel like Indiana's playing pretty well, with some exceptions, but overall for what they are, doing a pretty good job and playing more good minutes than bad, which to me is a good sign for this team being able to do some things here at the end of the season with, only the 1 road game left, 2 home games that are both obviously very winnable, and then, we'll see what the matchups are for the Big Ten tournament. But, certainly a 30-point win on the road against Rutgers helps to ease the sting of that Purdue game. But what do you guys think? I mean, how do you feel overall right now? Just your visceral feeling about this team. Are you confident? Do you see a slow finish to the season? Do you see this team picking up some steam and getting on a roll? Like, how do you feel about this team right now? Ryan, you first.
I think I would put the Maryland and Purdue losses in the same category as the Georgetown loss. Those were just good games. They didn't do what they wanted to do. They failed to win the game and maybe missed some opportunities, but they weren't terrible games. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't like they were just completely outclassed. Those were good, solid basketball games. Sometimes you lose good, solid basketball games. So I really do feel like since the Michigan game, or I guess since the Wisconsin game and including the Michigan game, the team has played well. It showed up. It hasn't been blown off the floor at any point. It's had some bad runs in games. It's had some great runs in games. But it's been battling, and these guys are not giving up. And I think that's a big deal, especially when you lose to a team like Wisconsin. Remember, that was our 3rd loss in 4 games, and the other 2 were to Ohio State and Purdue, where they did not play well. And the only win in that stretch was Rutgers at home, and they didn't play very well in that Rutgers game. So since that Wisconsin loss, the team has really refocused, I think, and is playing very good basketball. Now, you play good basketball, you're not always going to win. It's about playing good basketball, playing smart basketball, making the right decisions at the right times. I mean, a 1,000 things go into winning a basketball game. But the fact that they know who they are now, they're playing to their identity as much as they can, and they're trying whatever they can to make up for their deficiencies, and now you've got a post guy coming back who's actually doing some things. The team is better than it was a month ago, and I really believe that they're playing very good basketball right now. Probably they're not perfect. They're not playing perfect basketball, but they're playing probably about as well as you could have expected them to play at this point, and they continue to get better. You saw Robert Johnson today, a guy we've kind of lamented falling off a little bit, play very good game today, and play aggressively, attack the basket, do things like that he has not done for about a month. And so it was really, for me, it was impressive to see that. He's another piece that needs to keep going and keep developing, and the more he does that, the more Honor develops, the better it is for this team, and the better the chances are moving forward.
Mr. Bottoms.
I think I could sum this up best by I actually am excited about the things that this team can do, and they scare the hell out of me no matter who the opponent is. I think that's about as good as I can do. I mean, they do things so well when they're really rolling and doing what they want to do on offense. I mean, it's just amazing to watch at times. And then there are other sequences where you watch them on the other end of the floor and you think it's the worst team you've ever looked at before. And so I think it's, I guess, for what we're doing with the show, I mean, they make for good conversation because they're tantalizing in a lot of ways, and they can tease you with these great stretches of play and also make you want to rip your hair out and throw things across the room. So I think the highs are higher than I thought they would be, and the lows are probably lower than I thought they would be. But I think your point about the last few games is a good one when you really look back on it in its entirety. And I think you could really say the same of the Big Ten season as a whole. I mean, if you sit down and you look at the losses, really other than losing at home to Purdue, really just because A, you don't want to lose to Purdue at home, and B, you just don't want to lose home games at all. I think that you look and say, well, you know what, you lost at Michigan State, at Ohio State, at Purdue, at Wisconsin, at Maryland. I don't know that you'd really complain too much about any of those losses when you looked at what things were at the beginning of the season. And quite honestly, I thought IU probably deserved, maybe is not the right word to use, it probably deserved to win at Maryland more so than it did at home against Purdue in that game. And I think you win one of those games and you win one and lose one of those two, I think it's probably a lot better feeling maybe than a lot of people have right now. But I think overall, when you kind of take that step back and look at it through that lens, the part of the season that IU fans probably thought would be hardest at the beginning has turned out to be easier than where some of these stretches are. And that just really goes to show you it's hard to peg how teams are going to be, including IU, before the season. And you have a lot better idea of that now, and here we are. So I think the reality is that you've got 3 games left. There's a chance to finish 12-6 in the Big Ten. And if anybody had thrown that out at the beginning of the year, I think anybody would have jumped on top of it and taken it right away. So I think they're better than I thought they would be during the season, but I also have I wouldn't be surprised to see them lose to anybody, quite honestly. I think they could beat nearly anyone and lose to almost anyone, and I think as much as cliched as it about matchups and things like that, I think that is magnified by 100 times with this team based on what its strengths and weaknesses really are.
Andy Sunshine Bottoms, everybody. Thank you for the relatively optimistic outlook there, Andy. We appreciate it. Okay, so Ryan, there's an interesting quote over in the YouTube chat. You want to mention that, and that will lead us into giving our picks for the Northwestern game before we sign off here for the evening.
Yeah, Dan Argan, I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, says, hey, the Northwestern game is a home game. I go every year, and it's always full of IU alums. And that is very true. I have never been, but I know plenty of people who go to that game. There are obviously a ton of IU alums in Chicago, and they apparently pack the Northwestern arena, which is not very big. And so at times, I know during the Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo year, I think they went there last year. I'm not sure, but it was apparently very loud and very pro IU, and some Northwestern people were very upset about it. So hopefully that's still the case this year, and it's like a home game on the road.
So who are you picking, Ryan? I assume that you're picking the Hoosiers, but let's make it official.
Well, I'm an Indiana fanboy, of course. I have to pick the Hoosiers.
Andy?
Same here. Even though I'm known for giving balanced and reasoned analysis, I'm like Ryan. I'm going to go with IU as well.
And to the surprise of no one, I will pick the Hoosiers as well. As I said, I like the way this team is trending. I like how they bounce back tonight. I like their togetherness, their attitude, and frankly, I liked how Coach Crean. This is going to sound weird, but I liked how he sounded on the pregame show with Fish. Like he sounded confident, sounded like he knew his team was going to come out ready to play. And I don't always get that sense from him, but he just sounded very calm and ready to go. And I think it's such a sharp contrast to last year, but I think just the togetherness of this team is really helping them get through some of these tough moments that maybe past teams haven't been able to do. And I think we got some good things coming. I don't know how good those things are going to be or what that's going to mean, but I just feel like this team's got some big wins coming down the stretch. Okay, before we get to final thoughts, kind of an interesting note coming out of Nebraska. So Nebraska got just demolished tonight by Iowa, and I think Crimson Corey tweeted this out. But it's a snippet from some news story, and it's quoting Tim Miles. It says, "There will be chains on the doors locking it from the outside," Miles said, "until further notice." This is on the doors of the locker room. "So where will the players dress?" "Good luck," Miles said, glaring. "They're creative." So apparently Tim Miles has locked his team out of their locker room after this poor loss to Iowa, which I don't know what to say about that. His sweater was nice tonight. I know that. Andy, any thoughts on that?
I watched part of that game. They were nothing short of horrific. And really, I mean, they were down. I don't even think they scored 20 points in the first half, and Iowa's not necessarily a great defensive team. They just got crushed at home pretty much from the opening tip till the end of the game.
Hey, let me ask you one real quick question. I was thinking about this. So, that Nebraska win at the time seemed important, seemed big, and it was in context and timing when you think back to it, because it got Indiana off to a good start in Big Ten play. And it's a game a lot of people didn't think Indiana would win, but now you look at it, and it doesn't look very impressive because Nebraska hasn't done much. So how is a win like that viewed by the committee when it comes to the tournament? Because it certainly seems like a different type of win now than it did at the time, but what matters?
I think the biggest boost for IU at this point is just that it's a road win. I mean, at that point, Nebraska some of the luster was wearing off of them from last season coming into this one. I mean, at that point, they had already lost to Creighton and Incarnate Word, so I don't know that it was viewed as all that great at the time, even though people may have had a different thought on their ability to bounce back at that point. But I think its benefit is really just the fact that it was a road win for IU. So I don't know that they have a ton of time to really contextualize where each one fell at a given moment, but I think for IU's standpoint, it looks like a good win, or a good win because it was on the road, but that's really about it.
All right, well, let's go to some final thoughts here. Ryan, you can lead us off.
Yeah, I think that the best way to look at this today, obviously, it's Rutgers. You're going to crush them, hopefully, at least. But Indiana's 19-9 now, one win away from 20, and I think I always try and wrap this up to the entire season and connect it to the entire season. And in November we would have killed for 20 wins and 10 in the Big Ten. If we can get Northwestern, that's 10 wins in the Big Ten. It's a winning season in the Big Ten, which people are saying is down this year. I just think there are more good teams and not as many great teams this year. So I don't really think that this is a, quote, down year for the Big Ten. I just think that there's more parity below the elite team that's in it. So 10 wins is a big deal. We want to get to 12, but one more win to 20 with 3 games left, and one of which is Northwestern. I think that's a pretty great spot to be in, and I thought it was a fun game today to get some of those bench guys in and get some of the you see when those bench guys in, the entire starting core is all standing and cheering for anything they do, which shows that the team, clearly the guys are in it together and they respect what those guys do on a day-to-day basis in practice. So I thought it was a fun day, and hopefully we can carry this momentum into Northwestern.
Andy.
Yeah, I don't know there's too much exciting to say about this one. It was a game where IU really took care of business in a game that they needed to win, should win, and all those kind of things, which is great to see because we've seen other IU teams at times not do that. We've seen this team at times not do that and play at a level of competition. So I think that's a positive from that standpoint. If you want to, and the other thing is, they played 15 guys today, which I guess is a good problem to have. Although for me, doing lineup analysis, not ideal. So if anything, if anybody was less excited to see some of the bench guys in, it arguably was me. But should be relatively easy to go down and do that after the game. But definitely good to see those guys play, and also good to give some of these other guys a little bit of rest. I mean, IU hasn't had. I know they don't have a game over next weekend, but it feels like it's been a while since they've kind of had a week between games, and maybe I'm just forgetting something. But most of the starters only played in the 20s in terms of minutes, except for Yogi, who played 32. So get a little bit of extra rest, get them ready for Wednesday night at Northwestern, and hopefully take care of that road win, get to 5-7 away from home, which I think is pretty big, and 10 Big Ten wins. So a lot to play for in that game, and obviously the seeding piece that we talked about earlier is a factor in that as well. So, really a positive performance all the way around. The only potential negative is with the Hartman injury, so hopefully we'll get more information on that, and hopefully that turns out to be just kind of a bruising situation where they really didn't need to get him back in the game, so they didn't feel like they had to. And hopefully that turns out to be nothing, and he's ready to go on Wednesday.
Yeah, I've been looking for information but haven't seen it, so we'll certainly keep you updated. And make sure you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe. That's where you will get that subscriber-only email that Andy was talking about that he'll be putting together tonight. I just want to underscore, I think, the importance of this victory. I know you don't want to put too much stock in it, but a 30-point victory on the road is important. I think Tom Crean deserves kudos for having the team ready to play, because this is the type of game, coming off a tough home loss to Purdue, you go to Rutgers, kind of a Sunday midday game. It's the type of game that Indiana teams that aren't very good struggle with. And so I think just to come out and play like Indiana did today, regardless of the competition, is important, because you look back at this team's history just this season. I mean, there aren't many 30-point wins on the schedule. You go back to the New Orleans game. That was only a 20-point win at home. Savannah State was, I think, the last time that we beat a team by 30. And so I think to have a game like this where guys get in, a nice confidence-building win, and again, for it to be on the road, it's really important. Now, you're not going to extrapolate too much from it going forward, because we won't play a team as bad as Rutgers again all season long unless we somehow meet them in the Big Ten tournament, but I doubt that'll happen. But I think, you look for signposts in a season, and this is one that says, hey, this team is on the right track. I think if we come out today really struggle, even if you eke out a win, it's like, man, this team just seems to be struggling. But to get back on track like they did, dominate a team they should dominate, I think as an IU fan, that's a sign you should take that says, hey, this, let me embrace this team. Let me, instead of keeping this team at arm's length, this team can do some good things here moving forward. So let's embrace them. Let's hope that continues on Wednesday at Northwestern, and then that we come home for Iowa and Michigan State and finish with 2 just raucous home victories. And this team has a chance to really end the season on a high note, and that is why this game was so important, because they built some positive momentum, put the Purdue game in their rearview mirror, and now they can move forward and finish this season strong. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. Hey, by the way, we tried something new tonight. It was a halftime report. So if you have Assembly Call links bookmarked, you can bookmark assemblycall.com/halftime. And I think we'll try to start doing it every game. Follow us on Twitter, and I'll let you know, and of course tweet the link out at halftime. But people seem to like it. It was fun, and so schedule and time willing and everything, I don't see why I can't do it. So, but thank you to everybody who watched that and for all of your comments about it. I really appreciated that. It was fun to do. So with that said, everybody have a great Sunday night. Wherever you are, stay safe and warm, because I know the weather terrible down here in Dallas, so certainly with most of you being in the Midwest, I'm sure it's not great there. So stay safe, stay warm, and we will talk to you all Wednesday night after IU Northwestern. Have a great night, everybody.